Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and crib-size quilts are a lot of fun to make. They're small enough that we can manage them if we want to quilt them on our own, and by making the quilt tops, we can make them as elaborate as we want or as easy as we want. And we can also have the fabric do most of the work. And for this crib quilt, I'm going to have the material work for me. I found a company that does these children print panels, and there are so many different ones to choose from. They are 100% cotton, but they're a twill cotton sateen, which means they're a little bit heavier than quilting cotton. This panel is 29 inches by 39 inches. Now when you look at it, and it's hard to see, the panel is inside this edge. It's the way it was printed. It does give us some extra border around the outside. We can get large panels, and we can get panels of 7, which means we have a large panel and 6 additional 12-inch panels that are all coordinated with the same fun characters so that we can do other fun projects with them. Or we can add them right to the quilt. We can also get coordinating fabric, some little prints to go with it, or just some fun background fabric. And these all are that cotton sateen, so they're going to be very durable. This beautiful fabric and panels is from a company called Unique Fabric Panels, and they're an online Etsy shop where you're going to be able to have this shipped worldwide. It is a Canadian company from Ottawa, so their measurements are in meters, but they do have it broke down in inches for us. And the background fabric is a lot wider than what we're used to. We can still buy it by that yardage, but instead of being 45 inches, it's 58 inches. Once I have all of my fabric well pressed, then I do want to cut out my shape. And in this case, this panel was cut 28.5 inches by 38.5 inches. And I really wanted that 38.5 inches to go with my yardage. I am going to put 2 borders on, but I do want my first border going around to be directional. So when I look at that first border print, you can see all of the elephants are sitting in one position. So I do have that direction. So I do have enough fabric that I am going to be able to cut 38.5 inches, which is going to match this first side. So the first border, I'm going to cut the length of that fabric so that my elephants are staying in the right position. And that's going to be for the 2 sides. For the top and the bottom, I'm going to want to cut my fabric going along the width. So I'm going to straighten up that selvage and cut my 2 long strips at 38.5 inches by 4.5 inches. Now, if your panel is different, you may adjust that size. We just need those 2 sides to match up first. So this was the fold and this was the selvage. So I cut off those first 2 strips. The next 2 strips, I'm going to be able to cut from this width. So it's going from the selvage to that fold and back to the selvage. So this is what it's going to look like after it's cut. So I have the 2 sides and the 2 tops and lots for binding. So the 2 sides are cut at 38.5 inches by 4.5 inches. And those are going to get stitched on first, and I am using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. The second border is 4.5 inches, and it is going to equal 36.5 inches. And that's going to accommodate that extra width on each side. By cutting that length of the fabric and then the width of the fabric, I have my fabric in the direction that I need. So let's get that first border on, and then the second border is going to be a basic simple cut. I just love the look of a border when all of the animals are going in the same direction. Now I'm going to put on 1 more border. Now this border, I'm going to cut 4 inches. Now you can cut it larger if you'd like, but that 4 inches is going to fit inside of a crib batting. Now, if your batting's bigger, of course, you can always make that border bigger. So for the 2 sides, I'm going to need to cut a piece 46.5 inches by 4 inches. And for the top and the bottom, it will be 43.5 inches by 4 inches. So we're going to sew on those 2 sides first, and then the top and the bottom. And then we're going to work on that extra fabric of the little 12-inch squares. For these 6 square panels, I'm going to make a cube. A cube has 6 sides, so I need 6 squares exactly the same size. And these will be able to be trimmed down to a perfect 12-inch square. To sew these together, I am going to be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So what I want to do is draw the corner seam allowances along the back. I'm going to take a 1/2 inch and just up at the corner, draw that line down. Turn it the other direction and draw that seam allowance. So whatever seam allowance you choose, you need to mark this center point. For each square, I want to stop and start right here at that point. So when I match up my squares, I'm going to be starting right at this seam. To start this cube, I am going to sew 4 panels together. So I'm going to have 4 in a row. When I sew them together, I'm stopping and starting at those points. So I'm going to have 4 in a long strip with loose corners. So I have the 4 of them sewn together. I do want to take those seams and press them. So I'm pressing right along that fold. That's going to keep a nice crisp edge. Add the 2 blocks on the top and the bottom. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to match up those seam allowances and stitch from point to point on that one and on the other. So we're going to always have a little seam separated in these corners. So for every seam I stitch, I stop and start at my marks and then press a crisp seam. So I have this big T shape. I'm going to be able to follow the edge, pick this up, turn it, and sew. When those 2 edges are done, I'm going to be able to rotate it and sew. So I'm going to be able to rotate that block and sew all of those corners. So these seams go together, and then this will roll over to here, and this one will roll over to this bottom one. Each step, I am going to stop and do that pressing. So we want to press right along that seam allowance. And when you're doing that, just be careful we're not pressing any of the other panels. As we sew and press all of those edges, it's going to help keep that cube shape. So I went all the way around that one piece. Now I'm going to go all the way around the other piece except for one corner. And I'm going to do that corner now. I can see these 2 edges are going to match up, so I'm going to match them up. I'm still going to stop and start at these points, and I'm going to stitch in, but I'm only going to stitch in about 2 inches and backstitch. I want to leave this seam open. By not leaving it to the last one, we'll make sure that we don't forget it. So this is the seam I'm going to be able to fill this little cube. I'm still going to press that, and that way it'll be easier to hand stitch when I'm done. Now we're going to be able to continue and stitch all the way around. Now I have that cube shape all sewn together except for this opening, and now I can fill it up with some polyfill. I did use a full bag of the 20-ounce polyfill. So we now have this nice big cube. Just close that up with a little bit of a whip stitch and it's done. It will be a great toy for a child to play with, or even as a decoration in the room. So the quilt turned out quick and easy with those 2 big borders, and the animals are going in the right direction, and I have a cute little cube to go with it. Okay, maybe it's not so little, but it's definitely going to be a fun piece to have. I'll put a link in the description to unique fabric panels so you can check them out. And as always, thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. feel free to subscribe. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and I have a newsletter. It's all free under So Very Easy. And be sure to make every day a so-tacular day. Bye for now.